you don't need to be an expert, Dave, to figure that this would harm the Indian know-how and innovation in this. There would be those who would argue to what I'm saying by saying, no, but this is co-production. There are specialized technologies in infantry combat vehicles that the Indians don't have. My argument to that would be a deal of this kind, would benefit us in terms of getting a few of those vehicles, but the know-how under no circumstances will be shared in full.
Yes.
And even if it was shared in full, I don't see those as cutting edge enough. Let me be frank. The Sukhois built at Nashik by HAL being more expensive than a brand new Sukhoi you buy from Russia is we may laugh about it, but it's a very serious thing. We've been building Sukhois now for, over a decade and a half.
Yes.
And what does that tell you about co-production? What are the benefits finally then? You haven't made it cheaper here. I'm waiting to see which is that one deal that will, make me jump out of bed and say, finally it's happened. Finally, co-production and all those lofty words of technology transfer has resulted in something. Nothing has happened. Zero. And we're negotiating with the same company to buy more fighters, and we're still not going to get one page of technology know-how from them. So, I might sound angry, but believe me, this is a world of frustration. Made in India is a world of frustration that's only likely to get worse unless people take some really, really cruel decisions right.
Hello and welcome to the 20th episode of In Our Defense. Hi Shiv, how are you? I see you're just off anchoring, or I think you're about to go back on anchoring, I think. So thanks for taking out the time. I heard you have quite the busy schedule today. But thanks for coming in.
No. It's a summer vacation season, I think, and most people after the elections have made their way out, and
definitely most
people are coming back soon. So we'll all have our chance. Hamara number aayega. Right.
For our listeners and viewers, just a point to make before we begin. We are recording this a bit earlier than usual, so if you missed some big development in the world of defense on this episode, do pardon us, because we won't be, we wouldn't have known right now, obviously. Right. We'll on this episode talk about our pet peeve with the government of India when it comes to Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, etc., etc., etc. This is to do with the deal that is kind of being negotiated right now. There was a report this week that the governments of the US and India are in advanced talks to sign a deal to buy off the shelf first and then kind of build in India Stryker armoured infantry combat vehicles. These are made by a company called General Dynamics, and I think most of its production happens in Canada, if I'm not wrong. Which is what struck me a bit odd considering the kind of sort of freeze we have in ties with Canada right now. But we'll get into all of that. First, I want you to tell us what an armoured infantry combat vehicle is in the first place, and are there relatively new phenomena for the Indian Army? Because the last conflict that we fought, the proper full-fledged conflict, was the Kargil War, and the visuals that I've seen, whether it's documentaries or stock footage, is usually when it comes to infantry vehicles, it's usually just those big traditional green trucks, Ashok Leyland or Tata, and then troops being transported from one base to the other, and they literally the last mile thingy was done physical basically. This makes it sound like the vehicles are like almost on the front lines and armored, obviously, so that means they'll have some sort of weaponry and protection from IEDs, etc. So explain this equipment to us. And what's the battle use case for it?
So infantry combat vehicles have been used by the Indian Army for a long time. We have something called the BMP, which is basically a Soviet era tracked infantry vehicle, and we operate like hundreds of them. In fact, they've been either bought by India or license built by India in our ordnance factories for many years together. In fact, they also have a sort of license built Indianized version that has been built for a very long time. So the BMP is a kind of old, kind of aging, nearly obsolete kind of infantry combat vehicle that the army has been trying to replace for a very long time. Now, an infantry combat vehicle, for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, is a kind of military vehicle that is sufficiently armored, but also sufficiently nimble in terms of its ability to maintain a high speed. To transport a small group of, as the name suggests, a small group of armed infantry soldiers, into a contested battle zone, which means a vehicle that is capable of, pulling on board a small team of infantry soldiers with their weapons, etc., and getting them through a place where there might be a line of fire. There could be rifle fire or small arms fire or slightly heavier fire than that. And these vehicles are traditionally, of course, there are different kinds of infantry combat vehicles, but typically it's capable of safely transporting them through what would otherwise be called a hostile area where firing is taking place. So infantry combat vehicles are of different kinds. They are extremely useful because they're capable of transporting troops quickly to where they need to be. It's also can also be used for extraction of troops, from a sticky situation. Unlike tanks, which are big, heavy, hugely armored, capable of withstanding like a big kind of attack, but that slows them down. Tanks are not exactly fast-moving vehicles, right? Because their strength is in their huge gun and the fact that they are capable of withstanding, a large attack. Infantry combat vehicles have to trade off that protection for speed and agility because they need to be able to move really fast. So that's what an infantry combat vehicle is. It's not a complicated thing. It's a pretty simple kind of thing. But there are a lot of varieties of infantry combat vehicles across the world, and they've been used since the world wars, in fact. And the BMP that the Indian Army uses is a tracked vehicle. It's got tracks like a tank, and it's actually one of the reasons why the Indian Army has been saddled with these tracked vehicles for so long that it is now in the market for a large number of wheeled, 8-wheel drive or 6-wheel drive wheeled infantry combat vehicles, because they offer a slightly greater degree of flexibility and deployability, especially at high altitudes. And that's where this current deal that's being negotiated right now between the India and the United States comes in for the Stryker vehicles.
Yeah. Right. So let's get to the deal itself. I loved when you said it's a fairly simple equipment, not very complicated, because that's going to be the crux of the discussion today as well. So yeah, I was reading about the features of the Stryker. It's a class of vehicles. It's not just one vehicle. It's a whole family. But generally, Stryker vehicles they are armored. They have guns. Some of them have cannons, and they have run flat tires. They can suffer a puncture and still keep running. So when I was going through the specification list, like you said, I was like, doesn't sound bad. Like, theek hai, matlab,
yeah.
Kar sakte hai. Like, we have Tatas, we have Mahindras, we have Ashok Leylands, who've been in the trucking industry for a while. And I'm pretty sure if you ask them to, even if they don't have it right now, if you ask them to, they would be sort of able to come up with something like this. It does not really seem like an equipment that you need to negotiate with the US, because it's going to be very expensive. And we obviously, when it comes to the US, we have to be careful of what exactly we're taking from them, because when it comes from the US, it comes with I think you've described previously when it came to F-16s for the Pakistani Air Force, they come with a stringent list of do's and don'ts that you can do with it. Though critics as an of us will argue that, though this deal has a component for Make in India, but we'll get to that part a bit later too in this episode. First, do you feel this deal is necessary, isn't even needed, and could we have done this ourselves?
So let's first start at the beginning as to what the Stryker is. The Stryker is an 8-wheeled infantry combat vehicle, which is very, very modular. Any infantry combat vehicle is ultimately a shell. It will do what you make it do, or how you kit it out. So it can be a vanilla infantry combat vehicle. It can be depending on the special kind of skin you put on it, it can be a something that's capable of operating in a nuclear biological environment. Okay. You can use one for medevac. You can use one for, transporting VIPs in a hostile zone. It just depends on what you do with it, because ultimately an infantry combat vehicle is like a fancy car with lots of wheels. Okay, so let's just think of it like that. So other than that, there's nothing fancy about an infantry combat vehicle. The Stryker is let's be very clear. It's a very, very good vehicle, and it's one that has been used for many, many years. It has many operators apart from the United States as well. It's a tough beast of a vehicle. 8 wheels, armored plating. Many other different kinds of features that make it extremely agile on different kinds of terrain. Has a powerful engine, I think a 350 horsepower engine. It's got all kinds of, very, very rugged, war-tested features, which are typical of all US equipment. The advantage of US equipment is they are, purpose-built for actual conflict. They're not built to be showpieces. So all US equipment has been used in conflict or operational areas at some point or the other, and that applies for the Stryker as well. Now, the reason why India and the United States are now close to, coming to an agreement on India purchasing some Stryker vehicles and then, co-producing them in India comes under something called the DTTI. The DTTI is an India-US kind of agreement, which stands for Defense Technology and Trade Initiative. This was a specific protocol that was signed between India and the US under the Obama administration, if I'm not mistaken, in 2016. Under which it was proposed that since India and the US were becoming much closer in the military sphere, in the military trade sphere, in exercises, etc., billions of dollars in defense trade, how about India stand to benefit from some of the specialized US technologies, which India doesn't have ready access to, or India has been late to the game on? Now, the purpose of DTTI was supposed to be specialized technologies, things like drones, things like electronics, things like, I'm guessing even possibly things like AI and, cutting edge stuff, not bread and butter material. So when the United States proposed the Stryker vehicle, and remember that the United States has been sort of softly pushing the Stryker for a very long time. They bring it to India quite routinely for their exercise, Yudh Abhyas series of exercises that happen in India. Stryker brigades are very routinely brought. So Indian Army is very familiar with the Stryker. So that's actually a good thing for the Americans. But like I said, the point that you raise, which is 100% true, is in the last 20 years, companies like the Tatas, the Mahindras, Kalyani, which is the Bharat Forge company, and several others, including L&T and Ashok Leyland and stuff. They've, these are not startups. These are legacy Indian companies that have made their bones, made their millions with vehicles. So this is not new territory for them. Of course, building specialized military vehicles is not an easy task, but these companies have actually done so.
Yes.
So I am actually a little perplexed about why the Stryker is being proposed under a protocol between India and the United States that is supposed to restrict itself to technologies that India doesn't have access to. Now, I'm not saying that India can do better than the Stryker right now, but we sure the hell can get really, really close. And let me give you an example. The wheeled armored vehicle that the Tatas have built in collaboration with the government's Defense Research and Development Organization. It was called Kestrel for a while, and now it's called the WAP. It's very similar to the Stryker. These vehicles have been deployed in Ladakh for testing. They're already there. They're being looked at in large numbers for the army. Now, I am just wondering why, when a fully Indian technology vehicle is being primed and readied for the Indian military, why then does this co-production deal for a obviously competing vehicle, which is from the Americas, and we'll get to the Canada aspect in just a moment, why is that being para-dropped in? Because you don't need to be an expert, Dev, to figure that this would harm the Indian know-how and innovation in this. There would be those who would argue to what I'm saying by saying, no, but this is co-production. There are specialized technologies in infantry combat vehicles that the Indians don't have. My argument to that would be a deal of this kind, would benefit us in terms of getting a few of those vehicles, but the know-how under no circumstances will be shared in full.
Yes.
And even if it was shared in full, I don't see those as cutting edge enough to necessitate cannibalizing your local made in India industry. If we're talking about really, really, futuristic technologies like materials or stealth or, AI, controlled drones and things like that, I can understand, spending a large amount of money or, accommodating that kind of thing, even though you have a great startup ecosystem when it comes to drones and AI. But for a infantry combat vehicle, for God's sake, this is something that your industry has been toiling and perfecting and honing for the last 20 years, and they've delivered. It's not like they haven't. I'm not saying India's private sector is, all milk and honey. They also work, obviously, for their shareholder interests and corporate interests. They've had to navigate, a very, very non-level playing field when it comes to competing against PSUs in India and B against foreign imports. But now that they have this kind of level playing field, and we talked about this in our last episode as well, it just seems very counterproductive and frankly, suicidal to bring in this behemoth like the Stryker and negate the work that your local industry has done. Now, people might argue and say that this is a bit of a simplistic argument because we have to, Indian industry has to function and operate in conjunction, in collaboration. Look at this as a collaboration. I don't see it as that. A deal is a deal. When something like this happens and a huge amount of budget is committed towards the Stryker, it will at some level affect your flexibility to buy more from Indian companies. And even if those Indian companies are sort of lured into a collaboration with the manufacturers of the Stryker in the United States or Canada or wherever, how will they benefit when they have spent their R&D dollars in building these vehicles? What is so great that they're going to gain from this collaboration? I am not convinced.
Right. And the other aspect, and you tweeted about this, which is how I kind of researched more and found out, is that I think the production line right now is in Canada, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
Of the company called General Dynamics. Do you think that's gonna be playing a role at the back of Indian negotiators as they talk with the US government counterparts?
So this is a very interesting thing. And also, by the way, fun fact, General Dynamics is the company that actually designed the F-16.
Oh, okay.
So General Dynamics is the original creator of the F-16. And then basically the product and the intellectual property passed hands between many companies, and finally it ended up with Lockheed. So Lockheed Martin is not the creator of the F-16. It was actually a General Dynamics product. Interesting fact about that. But General Dynamics is a multifaceted company. Also, like many of the American companies we've been discussing recently, an old established, entrenched, classic American military hardware company that has done very well for itself. General Dynamics has interests in warships. They build vehicles, they build tanks, they build all kinds of things. So very, very well established and very well respected company. And the Stryker vehicle, which is actually a derivative of a Swiss vehicle, which was then modified into the Stryker that we know today, is built largely in Canada. Now, obviously, General Dynamics is not is headquartered in Canada, and it's many of its operations are in Canada, including the manufacture of the Stryker. But it's a North American company. They've got huge customer base as well as corporate presence in the United States and Europe and elsewhere. But the origins of General Dynamics are in Canada. So the interesting question you ask is, how does one ignore the Canadian aspect of this deal without in the context of the kind of ugly diplomatic temperatures right now between India and Canada? The simple answer to that is, exactly, how do we ignore it? Because there is no doubt whatsoever that even though this co-production deal or these negotiations are happening not between India and Canada, but between India and the United States strictly, and that the person we are negotiating with is sitting in the Pentagon, not in Ottawa or Toronto, wherever it is. It's the United States which is the supplier of these vehicles or the executor of this deal. like you said, how do you overlook the fact that a beneficiary in this entire dhanda is going to be Canada? There will when you buy Stryker vehicles off the shelf, it will mean Canadian jobs. It will mean the Canadian economy. It will mean whatever it is, even when you're co-producing them. And remember, in the Indian context, co-production usually means assembly of knockdown kits. We're still doing that with Sukhoi 30s after all these years. So believe me, co-production is a bit of a it's a red herring when it comes to India. It's never beyond some very complicated assembly of knockdown kits that usually come from abroad. So potentially speaking, this whole quote unquote co-production or made in India that we're talking about will still have a direct income stream going to some kind of supplier base in Canada. Now, I don't want anyone to get me wrong here. The people in General Dynamics, the people who work in their factories are all hardworking people. And, if they get customers on their own, that's a great thing. But the fact of the matter is, India isn't just any other country. We're not here to benefit those that wish us harm. I don't want to oversimplify this and say that, because they've been venerating Hardeep Singh Nijjar, we can't be talking about a contract that benefits Canada. Obviously, these things are much more complicated than that. Even India-Canada relations, and I will hold a mirror to myself, us in the TV media tend to oversimplify it to mean that our relationship is only that. The India-Canada relationship is vast. It's huge. It's cultural. It's people to people. It's there's a huge amount of trade. There's a huge amount of business and investment between the two countries. This ugly flashpoint over Khalistani terrorists is one aspect of it, which has kind of left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. But it is by no means a defining feature of the relationship. However, given that the bad blood is led by none other than the current Prime Minister of Canada, one wonders whether enough people know that this deal that is being negotiated and being reported, as you said, in the Times of India as being nearly done. Do enough people know that this benefits Canada? I don't think that can be ignored. It cannot be overlooked, certainly. It would be politically explosive, and I hope it does become politically explosive because questions need to be asked about, why? A, you're doing something that doesn't fit in with the protocol under the DTTI. B, unless we're getting things very, very wrong here, this appears to be benefiting a country that has just held a moment's silence for a person who you have designated a terrorist. C, you will be harming Indian industry by bringing this vehicle in. So I'm just, unless I'm blind, I'm just failing to see the upside.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And in fact, the relations with Canada is so thanda right now that PM Modi, who was in Italy recently for the G7 summit, you should see his social media account of him meeting all the respective G7 leaders. And for almost everybody, he had a nice warm message, 2-3 sentences. For Justin Trudeau, it was just a pithy one-liner, met Canadian PM Justin Trudeau, full stop. That's it, nothing else. Right? So that's the status of the free right now. But we'll go into the theories of, especially the online theories. I mean, the reporter of Times of India, I forgot his full name, Rajat something.
Pandit,
yes. When he put out the story on his social media, there were people replying to him with asking similar questions. The Canada wala point, I think, is something that only you brought out the day after. And they had some theories. So we'll discuss that and talk about the larger picture of government-to-government deals when it comes to the world of defense and defense equipment, but after a quick break.
Nobody has claimed responsibility considering the region has been targeted by Islamic militants. So do you think, in your opinion, do these attacks follow a pattern of, these designated terror attacks?
I don't think it follows a pattern. The messaging is more about who they're targeting and not how many. Synagogue burned to the ground. Jewish community attacked. Brutal killing of a priest, a Jewish priest, clearly shows the message that they wanted to drive across. It's ironical in a way, Anna, because in this Israel-Hamas war, Russia has played a very different kind of a role, where Russia has a lot of engagement with Juice.
Welcome back. Shiv and I are discussing a deal that was reported this week to be in advanced stage of negotiations between India and the US for Stryker armored infantry combat vehicles. Before this break, Shiv has very nicely given us the picture of why this deal is so perplexing in terms of why India is wanting to invest in something that can more or less be built at home by your own companies. So I want to talk about some of the theories that were doing the rounds on social media, and also want that to kind of lead this discussion into the larger aspect of how do governments go about signing defense deals and contracts. In the episode on Rafale, I think, if I'm not wrong, or just generally before, we've spoken about how the military wings, whether it's the Army, Air Force or Navy, they will test out the equipment and they will put their recommendations to the government. And finally, the government takes a call weighing in everything, diplomatic interest, strategic interest, financial interest, etc., etc., etc. So there could be times that, like we discussed before the break, that just because you ties with Canada currently on the ice, so you are like, we will not do business with you for a while. Another example is, I think there was a Reuters report yesterday that China wants to resume direct flights between India and China, obviously. But in New Delhi has been like, no, because of the current standoff along the border. So stuff like this does happen in the world of defense. So to that end, there was this one comment on social media that kind of made me wonder. The comment was that perhaps this is sort of a sweetener or sort of like a compensation for not going ahead with the US fighter jet for the Indian Navy. It's not completely formal yet, I think, if I'm not wrong, but the Navy is India is more or less kind of going with Rafale's, the naval variant of the Rafale for its two ships. So one, do things like that really happen in the world of negotiation? Ki, "Arey yaar, sorry, aapse plane nahi le paye, to chalo ye deal aapko de dete hain." And second, if that does happen, then to extend that question to some sort of a ridiculous territory, have there ever been instances where the Indian government or any government, they have signed deals for equipment their militaries do not actually need in the first place?
Oh, that's a question that's going to get all of us into a lot of trouble. I'll answer the first question first. When it comes to the United States, compensation doesn't quite apply, and I'll tell you why. The reason for that is only since 2007, India has acquired upwards of $22 billion worth of military hardware from the United States. Whether it is, P-8I submarine hunter aircraft, whether it is the C-17 aircraft, whether it's the Apache helicopters, whether it's Chinook, whether it is, Harpoon missiles, anti-ship missiles, an absolute, a buffet of equipment has been purchased from India. And I've just mentioned all the sexy things. There are various other things. There are radars and all kinds of things that you don't normally see that have been purchased in very, very high value deals from the United States. So there's no question. There's no compensation that is owed to the United States for not giving them a certain deal. A. B. The naval fighter deal is currently being negotiated between India and France for the Rafale, and the reason for that is that not only did the Rafale outmatch the F-18 in various parameters in what was in my view, a totally unnecessary test, because if you have the Rafale in the Air Force, why would you choose any other aircraft for the Navy? But the Navy decided to go the distance and do those trials, etc. As it turned out, the Rafale was a superior fighter and they've chosen the Rafale for it. Now, the reason why I don't think the General Dynamics, the Stryker deal under negotiation is compensation is because A, the fighter deal is not final just yet with the Navy. B, there is an even bigger Air Force fighter jet deal that's a program or contest that is still active for 114 fighters, for which the United States is a very big and if I'm reading things right, a pretty strong contender. Now, the United States has pitched, and the United States, which had learned its lesson they made a disastrous move by pitching the F-16. They tried to rebrand it very embarrassingly as the F-21 and all kinds of rubbish like that, and tried to push the F-16, which even they had stopped buying towards India, thinking, हमने लेना बंद कर दिया, अब तुम लोग ले लो, third world में तुम लोग ले लो ये F-16. Obviously, India didn't buy that rubbish and it was bounced. And that's why, and they learned a very bitter lesson. And the United States spent a huge amount of money in that campaign. So they learned a bitter lesson that they can't treat India like, they treat the rest of the third world. Now they have offered the F-15 Eagle II, which is a fighter that the United States Air Force itself is buying. So there's a greater degree of respectability in terms of what the United States has asked for, is pitching. So this compensation dynamic actually works both ways. India is not a pushover. India doesn't owe anything to any country. If India felt in any way beholden to compensate someone or make sure that they are cajoled because they were denied a sweet biscuit, then India would have never given the original Rafale deal to France. They would have just given it to the United States, because if you're talking about political compulsions and the political benefits of a fighter deal, then there is no bigger country than the United States to do a deal with. So that didn't happen, which just shows that India acts very independently. So short answer is, I don't think it's compensation for that. I think it is something that's being pushed from the inside, either by the army, which is not completely convinced by India's private sector, or much more likely the fact that the United States has been pushing the Stryker for so long. It's become a kind of prestige issue for the US. They've been pushing it for a long time. I remember in 2008 or 2009, I had gone to a place called Babina near Jhansi, in central India, where the Yuddha Abhyas exercises were happening, and they had Stryker vehicles there at that time. And I remember seeing them, and I remember the army guys being dazzled by the Stryker, thinking, I wish we had one of those kinds of vehicles, especially for our high altitudes. And it was at that point that the Indian Army decided, we need stuff like this. And the Tata DRDO vehicle that's being used or tested in Ladakh right now comes really close to that capability. Now, why you've spent 2 decades doing that, so why would you go for something new coming in from the outside just because it's been pushed consistently for such a long time? I know diplomacy and relations are complicated. Sometimes you have to throw people a bone, in order to sweeten other aspects of what you want. And this could very well be part of it. There is always an element of, okay, we will sacrifice this bit in order to benefit in some other area. Right. And I'm not saying that that's not possible. That's most definitely possible. But I just see that I'm judging this from what is visible to us right now. And I just think it's bad.
Yeah. And you want to take a shot at the controversial question that in the world of defense deals, does it happen that a government might end up purchasing something for its military that its military does not really need?
The Sukhoi 30 deal. And I'm going to be shot by every Sukhoi 30 pilot, including the air chief at that time, and possibly, even the military planners and the people in the MOD at that time. It was a deal. Actually, the thing is, it's been written about. This has actually been written about, including by Shekhar Gupta in a very, very fine column that he wrote called A Plain Tale from the Past. This was an incredible example of a military not needing this, but the government, the opposition, and everyone in between coming together without bickering and deciding, okay, let's do this because we need to help our friend Boris Yeltsin, who was the president of Russia, of the Soviet Union, of Russia at that time. Now, Boris Yeltsin was facing, a bad election. He was facing an economic crisis, especially in the place where the Sukhoi factory was located. And he had reached out to India and said, listen, obviously not in these words, but he said, we need to do this. Mulayam Singh Yadav was the defense minister. At that time, unimaginable when you think about it now. Mulayam Singh Yadav was the chief minister. There was the opposition. There were people like Sharad Pawar and all these people involved. And you basically had coalition governments and the opposition coming together, burying their bullshit and saying, we need to do this for India-Russia friendship. So the poor Air Force was sitting in one corner saying, "Arey bhaiya, humko chahiye hi nahi ye sab. So we don't need this stuff." The truth of the matter is they wanted more Mirages. They wanted more Mirage 2000. They said, we don't need heavy jets. Right now our thing is like light, agile, easily scramblable frontline fighters. We don't want Sukhois. Again, of course, I'm oversimplifying it. Of course, the case was made finally, for the Air Force to get them. And now the Air Force is the largest operator of Su-30s, ironically.
Yes.
But let it be remembered forever and ever that the Air Force never wanted these in the first place. It was a pure, unadulterated political decision that was taken. I'm not saying it's a bad decision, but all I'm saying is it didn't spring from a requirement. It didn't spring from a operational requirement. It was a favor that India did to Boris Yeltsin. India has certainly benefited from it.
Of course.
But that's the truth of the matter. So.
Wow, that's quite the interesting tidbit, actually, Shiv. Right. So something struck my head when you were talking earlier about political oversight on defense deals. And the example, since we're talking about the US has a very stringent sort of oversight. Its Congress has to clear almost every defense deal. I remember there was some deal within it that was stuck as well recently over some issue. I think the allegations of India having Indian agents having allegedly plotted.
This was the drone deal, the
drone deal. Yeah. So there were reports that was stuck in the Congress because of these particular allegations. So just a quick thought in my head, and what do you make of it? Do you think India should also have such a setup? Because then perhaps you would not have had the controversies that you've had with the Bofors guns, the controversies that you've had with the Rafale jet. Not that I'm not taking sides on any of the allegations, but controversies did happen. So you perhaps would not have had that if you had sort of parliament bipartisan approval for any defense deal that India does. Do you think that's something that we should start looking at as we become a more mature democracy?
Look, so the two things are not the same, because in the United States, you're talking about exporting something.
Right.
With India, you're talking about something that's being purchased, yes. which is basically executive prerogative to give the country the tools it needs for national security. So the two things are actually a bit of the opposite, but I understand your question. And I think in an ideal world, any large acquisition in terms of national, and remember, executives, that means the government in the of the day, holds national security very close to itself. And it cannot and will be justifiably unwilling to let things like acquisitions of equipment be subject to parliamentary approval. Even the United States doesn't do that. They don't need approvals for acquiring things. However, I think in the case of things like scams, in the case of things like when any controversy happens, I feel that there needs to be greater structure and greater oversight in terms of there having to be debates, there having to be, disclosures, etc., into what has happened. Whether it is Bofors, whether it is Augusta Westland,
yes.
whether it is, any of the other defense scams that have happened, including the allegations of a Rafale scam, which simply wasn't the case. Parliament is there for those debates. Now, it's a different thing that the kind of bad temper and level of distrust between the executive and the opposition has reached such a level that neither is willing to even give space for a kind of measured, substantive debate on it. You are chowkidar chor hai from the start, right? So I don't know if the atmosphere exists for that kind of mature debate on such things. But I can tell you that having tracked the Pentagon for a long time, they've got an agency called the Defense Security Cooperation Agency. They've got a separate agency that just deals with United States foreign military sales to friendly countries, and that's how the United States does things. They actually the United States sells weapons to other friendly countries through two ways. There are two different things. One is called the direct commercial sale, where that country's contract is with the supplying company, like India signs a deal with a Boeing or a Lockheed Martin and things like that, or there is something called a foreign military sale, where the contractor is the US government itself. Now, all of India's deals have been foreign military sales deals where we deal directly with the US government. We don't deal with the company. So the US government, in effect, purchases the equipment from the company and then supplies it to India. So it's like almost like a diplomatic deal rather than a defense kind of deal. Which brings me back to the Stryker question, which is that India, if this deal comes to fruition, and it looks like it is going to come to fruition, India would not be dealing with Canada at all.
Yeah.
So that might actually be the cover fire the government might need to push this through, which is that we are dealing with the United States government. They subcontract manufacture to the Canadian entity, such as it is, purchase those vehicles and then supply them to India. So the negotiating party is the United States government. There's no Canada involved in terms of the interfacing with India is concerned.
Yeah.
And therefore, that's how it would work.
Yeah. Right. Final thought on this topic about Make in India. We've spoken about this previously. Shiv has been very brutal to talk about when it comes to the Make in India aspect of all these foreign deals. Ironically, Sukhoi was an example you raised even then of how it is more expensive for us today to produce a Sukhoi in our
Than to buy a new one.
Than to buy a new one. So we'll keep that question aside. But don't you feel of late there has been an increasing conflation of the actual idea of Made in India with what is now Make in India? Essentially, you're doing something that you are producing something that someone else has developed. Because when I thought of Atmanirbhar Bharat, when I think of Atmanirbhar Bharat rather, I think of something that you're building from scratch.
Yeah.
When I think of self-reliant India, I think of an India that is reliant on its own industries to develop, design, and produce equipment for your country. But of late, the Make in India part of every defense deal is sort of used to justify it. Ki dekho, we are buying we were supposed to buy 18 fighter jets off the shelf, but 104 will be made in India. So great progress. So this other aspect of Make in India, do we actually benefit, whether it's with the technical know-how of the people actually doing the production at whatever facility? Jobs, I'm guessing definitely. Money, we've spoken about previously, how it is in some cases more expensive than that. But is there any benefit, and do you think we should really focus a bit more on developing in India?
So I'll start off with a very small example. In all the years that we've done technology transfer and so-called co-production and made in India of foreign products, not for a single moment have we benefited in any know-how when it comes to critical technologies like a jet engine.
Yes.
Just take one simple example of a jet engine. It proves the truism that no matter how deep or how complicated the relationship between two countries in a particular defense deal, they can boast about all kinds of technology transfer. We will give you everything. We will give you the source codes of the software, everything. At the end of the day, if you're going to be a cookie cutter, making those things in India, of course, benefiting in some way economically because you create jobs, etc. That's fine. But if you are not benefiting in spirit from the actual intellectual property, the know-how, then what's the point? For instance, by now, if intellectual property and made in India and transfer of technology was really such a big thing and really substantive, HAL would have been able to design its own fighter aircraft. Ground up from the Sukhoi. Okay. Again, simplistic, but I'm saying this is what the purpose of TOT is. If we've done so much work with the French for so many years and with the British for so many years, with the Jaguars, with all the fighters we've done, how come we are nowhere close to building our own jet engine? What happened to all that TOT? We can get into the nitty-gritties and say, but that wasn't part of the deal, or HAL has done other things with other fighters. Not everyone needs a whole new fighter, etc. Well, perfectly acceptable. But the true fact of the matter is, India is the world's largest importer of weapons, period.
Yes.
Mic drop. There's nothing more anyone needs to say. And until that statistic holds true, everything else is just your usual gyan and rhetoric. We have not gained. I mean, let's say this brutally, and I'm happy that this is the only show that says it so brutally, Dev, which is that India has not gained so far from a single piece of any co-production deal or any made in India deal. Now, made in India has its place. Companies, this government has made a structure where if foreign companies want to do defense deals with India, there has to be a co-production component, there has to be a technology transfer component, there has to be a local production component. Very, very good. All of those things have forced companies to do it. But if a company ends up outsourcing just some routine work, not work that actually benefits the integrator by giving them the kind of launch pad they need to do this kind of thing themselves, it's really not a big deal for the Tatas or L&T to take blueprints from a foreign company and make it themselves. But these companies are where they are because they've been doing innovation by themselves. They've been doing it themselves without outside help. Now, that's what you need to harness in a really big way. And let me be frank, the Sukhois built at Nashik by HAL being more expensive than a brand new Sukhoi you buy from Russia is we may laugh about it, but it's a very serious thing. We've been building Sukhois now for over a decade and a half.
Yes.
And what does that tell you about co-production? What are the benefits finally then? You haven't made it cheaper here. It hasn't created this enormous game-changing kind of aircraft ecosystem that you would want. I don't see any rub-off effect on the production rate of LCAs, which is desperately needed right now. The quality of the relationship between the Air Force and HAL hasn't dramatically changed like it should have, considering that these are aircraft being built for your only big customer. So yeah, the benefits are just not there for me to see. I'm waiting to see which is that one deal that will, make me jump out of bed and say, finally it's happened. Finally, co-production and all those lofty words of technology transfer has resulted in something. We've sunk billions of dollars into the Rafale deal. There was so much talk of how one of the offset is another episode, by the way, which we'll do. Oh, and believe me, you're going to have to straitjacket me for that episode because that's really going to get my blood up. But the fact of the matter is, under the Rafale contract, in the offsets obligations by the maker, India should have been able to build its own jet engine by now. Nothing has happened. Zero. And we're negotiating with the same company to buy more fighters. And we're still not going to get one page of technology know-how from them. So, I might sound angry, but believe me, this is a world of frustration. Made in India is a world of frustration that's only likely to get worse unless people take some really, really cruel decisions right now.
Right. And I'm glad inner defense allows you the space to vent out your frustration.
This is true. Yeah.
Right. Let's bring this episode to a close with a small nugget, rather. Since we are talking about armored vehicles, if you remember in 2014, when PM Modi took oath for the first time, Anand Mahindra had famously put out a proposal that, the new Modi government, or rather the new PMO and the SPG under him, not under him really, protecting him, should not be using any of the foreign armored vehicles anymore, and that his Mahindra Scorpio, because I think PM Modi, as CM Modi in Gujarat, used to use a Scorpio, and that he said we have the technology to, kind of make the Scorpio as safe as one of your foreign whatever. Never really happened because these are matters of obviously national security when it comes to the Prime Minister. So the SPG right now I think uses a mix of Range Rovers, Toyota Fortuners and a couple of Mercedes Maybachs. But that was like around 10 years ago. Do you think the Indian auto industry has reached that point perhaps where in the near future the SPG could look at perhaps local production of all these armored vehicles?
100%. I mean, your auto industry is building vehicles that can withstand 14.5 millimeter rounds. So 100% they should be looking at it. And not just when you say that, are they capable of doing that right now? Not just that, it should come from the other way. The SPG, the Prime Minister's office, the Indian government should take a decision saying that by 2026, we will stop using foreign vehicles in our convoys. They got to stop. Whether it is Anand Mahindra or Ashok Leyland or the Tatas or whoever, doesn't matter. but these things need to be Indian. It sends out a message.
Yes.
How long are you going to have Maybachs and Range Rovers and stuff? I mean, those are fabulous vehicles. There's no doubt. And by the way, Tata owns
Range Rover.
Jaguar and Range
Yes.
Rover. So technically it's an Indian thing, but you know what I mean. I think something that's made right here,
Exactly.
using Indian engineers and designers and Indian hands and know-how, I think that's the way to go. I really hope it happens. This has been, believe me, this has been a discussion within auto and defense circles for a very long time. How to completely make that Indian, because that sends out such a big message,
Yes,
doesn't
it
it?
does.
You're India. Desh badal gaya hai. It's a new brave kind of country in a very comfortable in the international order. You can't have Maybachs shipping your prime minister around, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, look at the US president. I mean, they are so anal about the US president only using their car, even in foreign countries. I think that's perhaps the only head of state who goes to a different country and takes his own car along with him.
With them, yeah, correct.
Great. I think let's end it there. Thanks, Shiv, and I think you're welcome for this being a platform for your to vent your frustration when it comes to Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India. And yes, the offsets one, yes, we will definitely have an episode on that. Thanks as always to our producer Anna Priyadarshini as well. That's it for this week's Defense Dose. For more, tune in next week. Till then, stay safe and do not cross any boundaries with our passport. Bye-bye.